This daily dose is brought to you by Pirate.Black. ARRR!
Whew. This one's going to turn into a rant. It already has. No more notes. What's up, sons? It's Blind Rod with Son of a Tech once again, and today we're going to ask and answer the simple question, WTF is Pirate Chain? So before we can really answer what Pirate Chain is fully, we kind of have to talk a little bit about the principles of crypto. Principles of crypto being peer-to-peer and obviously trustless is part of that. Trustless, which is confusing to a lot of people, basically just means no banks. Think of it that way. You can exchange from you to me without the interference of a third party, period, end of story. Now, in a lot of cases, people say like keeping cash on hand, cash is powerful back in the day. Of course, there's the gold argument. Think of it along those lines, except a digital currency version of that. And that is in the Bitcoin white paper. These are things that a lot of people found, very profound and very important to, of course, the blockchain. And to facilitate that, then we get into decentralization, which means validation of the transactions and so on has to be decentralized, so not one entity is controlling those transactions. And so that's why we saw initially, the proof of work idea. And because Nakamoto thought that essentially, CPUs were in great supply and we could always validate transactions with that because the common man has them. That was kind of the path forward he took when implementing the proof of work. However, that's changed due to ASICs and the control of the market Bitmain has over it. Now, there are more manufacturers coming online. That's going to be better. The further and further you can decentralize the networks, in theory, the better for everybody. Now, there are other platforms, introducing proof of stake and so on, and we can cover those later. But the real important thing is to understand that the idea, or the original idea, was to allow people to exchange currency between each other without the interference of a third party. Now, whether or not you agree with that, okay. But if you are into cryptocurrency, technically, that was the whole deal from the get-go. That's the foundation, okay? If you want to argue over that, I'll just reference you to the Bitcoin white paper over and over again, and then we could go into the Cypherpunk manifesto beyond that, which talks about privacy and how we've given that up. Now, we've given up privacy in a lot of ways across the board with, the invention of the internet coming along and the ability to basically have more convenient goods and services in exchange for our privacy at the end of the day. The reason this is done primarily is because Google has facilitated a majority of this, and their entire goal is to sell your data. That is basically what you've traded using these internet websites for free and using these search engines and so on. You're trading essentially your privacy and your data for a service. That's the way it works. Now, cypherpunks back in the 90s were very concerned with this and were working on different cryptographic algorithms to basically secure anything from communication over the internet to eventually, of course, the ability to secure the networks for blockchain, right? So not just networks, to secure the blockchain. And that didn't really work out with Bitcoin because it is traceable, right? So you can eventually trace everything back to a wallet, which you can then attach to a person because they have been integrated with services like Coinbase, etc. I bring this up because when we were talking about Pirate Chain, what we were talking about is a privacy coin. So the most popular privacy coin that you may be aware of would be Monero. Now, this creates an issue because Monero and privacy coins in general will not, by nature, be implemented into services such as Coinbase, Crypto.com. You could just list them all, right? So any service that is directly reporting to an entity or a government of any sort would not allow any sort of privacy to be maintained. Therefore, what ends up happening is if you are basically participating in these privacy networks, it's a lot more difficult for you to exchange those privacy blockchain coins for real coins, or for fiat, I should say, real money, or for goods and services. It just makes it more difficult to do that. Now, of course, you can use decentralized exchanges and maybe some outside exchanges like TradeOgre or something along those lines that don't require user registration. Those are still centralized. There's a lot of different points or separations, lines of separations between different services, and then convert it to something that is more easily tradable for goods and services, such as Bitcoin or Ethereum, and that is a possibility. So Pirate Coin's nothing new. What it is, though, is that it is a privacy coin that is built on top of Komodo. Now, Komodo is a really special case once again, too, because when we talk about Komodo, we have to talk about scalability and their approach towards scalability. And I'm going to try to keep this as simple as possible. As opposed to a single coin trying to be scalable, like take Ethereum or Polkadot, where they use parachains or parathreads or quorums, or basically just multiple chains, right? Komodo's approach is to basically use a platform that allows multiple chains on it. So Pirate Chain itself isn't necessarily what I would call scalable, but by utilizing Komodo and its platforms, it can become much more scalable. This is also a manner in which they can prevent a 51% attack. And one of the big positives for developing a chain on top of Komodo is that to be 51% attacked, they would also have to 51% attack the Komodo chain and other an established chain, meaning it becomes more difficult for a 51% attack to take place, which is why people would build on top of that. Now, for the privacy features in particular for Pirate Chain, it is Z snarks, so nothing really new here. You can see Zcash and so on. As far as their consensus mechanism, once again, nothing special here. It's going to be Equihash, and basically you are thinking of Zcash, etc., which is why the Z9 Mini is what we basically used and found to be profitable on mining it, because it uses the same algorithm. And that's kind of really where we're at as far as all that goes. Now, the name obviously kind of leans you towards that whole Pirate Bay, internet pirate kind of life or whatever, right? So that could be a little bit more difficult for them in the future if we're talking about acceptance outside of what I would call not necessarily dark web, but maybe like alternate web, right? And that's really going to be up to you on how you think the public will perceive that as far as from an investment standpoint and so on. The point of it, though, at least in my opinion, is not to essentially increase the value of the coin, but to be able to trade in private between two parties without the interference of another party.
Follow the treasure to pirate.black, because financial privacy today is freedom tomorrow. ARRR!